Hey everybody, it's Robert Alaniz, and this is another episode of Collecting the King Show. I'm very excited and honored to have a very, very special guest on the show. And it's not too often that I have guests that actually worked with Elvis or worked with the Colonel. Joe Tunzi, of course, has been on, and I've had other guests who are fans. But this is the first time I actually have a guest that was there and actually met the Colonel and met Elvis Presley and knew Red and Sonny West and some of the entourage. He actually knew them because he went on tour with Elvis in 1974 for one of the tours, and he'll tell us more about that. So I want to welcome James Dvorin to the show.
Thank you, Robert.
I'm
Good to be here.
so happy that you're here. I really am. I've been talking to your brother Howard about the possibility of him coming on the show, but he's kind of shy.
Yeah, he's the shy one in the family.
Yeah, he could do it, but you know he was always kind of I could tell the thrill wasn't there. But when I talked to you, the thrill was there. So
anything with Elvis is exciting. Yeah,
I agree 100%. Yeah. I've mentioned Al Dvorin so many times on the show. He did my show at the Collecting the King show in Memphis, Tennessee, and he was a guest maybe 4 or 5 times, I believe. He would come in, sign autographs and stuff. And of course, I wouldn't let him leave unless he said, Elvis has left the building, in front of everybody at the show. And one time I had a microphone and speakers, and I gave him the mic, and I said, here, Al, you know what to do. I worked very, very hard on promoting my show. As you know, because you worked with your dad, promotion is not an easy thing. You have to make all arrangements with the hotel. You have to make sure everything is set up properly. You have to make sure your publicity goes out. You have to make sure if you have a thing that you have to pass out that they're all ready to go. And it takes a lot to prepare. And I did the show in Memphis for 25 years. I think it was maybe the second show that Al did when he came in and did signed autographs. When he found out I lived in Chicago, he came up to me and he said, you put on a very professional show. Good promotion. I just want you to know that. He walks away and Johnny B goes, do you realize probably one of the greatest promoters in the world just said you're a really good promoter? He says, man, you should be honored. And Carol knows this. He would always call. We would get home from Memphis and there'd be a message on the answering machine. And he would say, Robert, this is Al Dvorin. Just wanted to let you know you did another great show. He says, and I enjoyed it very, very much. And I hope you had a safe drive home. And congratulations, another great show. And I'm like, wow, this guy is so cool.
My father appreciated people who were able to attain a certain level of proficiency, of expertise, of professionalism. And if he paid you a compliment, you were doing something right. Because he knew the best of talent. And when he paid you a compliment, he meant it from the heart, and it's well-deserved then. That's right.
I think that's what I loved about Al was that, to me, I've been an Elvis fan my whole life, and I saw Elvis in 72 in Chicago, which we can talk about in a little bit.
Right.
But Elvis, to me, was like surreal in many, many ways. Had somebody told me that, when you get into your 40s or your 30s, you're going to meet the guy up on the stage going, Elvis has left the building, I would have said, yeah, right. You're going to meet Joe Esposito. You're going to meet Sonny West and Red West. You're going to meet all these people because they were like, I don't know how to say it. They were just surreal. So when I actually had the opportunity to meet them, I was like in awe. Sometimes I was speechless.
Fantasy world. It's like another planet. And you're right. Elvis was like that. Elvis was like no other superstar. He wasn't just a singer. He wasn't just an entertainer. Thanks to the Colonel and thanks to his own talent, the combination of the two of them made Elvis otherworldly. That's exactly right. And anyone around him becomes part of that world. It's unattainable. It's different from most other entertainers or singers. You've got that exactly right.
And it's funny you say world because Elvis was world famous.
Yes.
People from Germany, from the Netherlands, from England, Romania, who actually watch this show. To this day, it amazes me how big his outreach or his fandom was.
You could say that first name Elvis, and you don't have to say anything more. Elvis, anywhere in the world, and you're not talking about Elvis Costello, the football player Elvis Peacock. There's no mistake.
Right.
There's to Elvis. That's right.
There's only one Elvis.
That's right.
So we have some questions for you. Okay, so let me. I got my cheat sheet here. So let's use this. All right. Let's start with the beginning. What was your earliest memory of your dad?
Early on, for me, because of when I was born, the time I come into recollection, Elvis was making all those movies between 60 and 68. So he was not performing live in concert. So my father was very busy with his own show business entertainment agency. He was the head of Al Dvorin agency, which at the time it wouldn't have meant anything. I was a little kid, but I knew he's a booking agent. I didn't even know what that meant, and that he's a theatrical agent. And I learned years later he was the largest independent booking agency in Chicago. 54 West Randolph, downtown, across from what was then the Civic Center, Daley Plaza. The Woods Building doesn't exist anymore. 54 West Randolph, the Woods Building, filled with other entertainment agents, copyright producers, music writers. It was a music building, 54 West Randolph. And my father was not around much because you can imagine with nightclubs and the kind of entertainment that he was involved with. During the day, you go to school, etc., and at night he's at the nightclubs. The Chez Paris was something he spent a lot of time with and was booking them incessantly. He was the person they turned to for jugglers and singers and hypnotists and comedians, or as he said, the comics, in the business of the comics. So he was not around because he was busy with his business during my formative years. It's not to say he was an absentee parent, because he was the weekends and other times, but he was very devoted during that period of time because Elvis was busy making those movies. So my father was very involved with his own agency.
And I'm sure everybody wants to know, how did your dad meet the Colonel? I know Tom Diskin was involved, right? They were friends, right? Weren't they in the Army together or something?
My father met Tommy Diskin in the Army. They served together in the Pacific Northwest. And he didn't go overseas. My father, during the war, did serve proudly, but he was stateside, and he met Tommy in the Army. He then hired Tommy to be I don't know if you called it in those days, a male secretary. Tommy's strength and talent was his precision. He had almost to the point of, they didn't know the term OCD at the time, but all the pencils sharpened to the same length and everything just so. But it's a good skill to have in an office, and my father had him running the office. Later on, of course, he lost him to the Colonel because the Colonel could use somebody like him. My father's with Tommy Diskin since the Army, where they met. And then, of course, my father goes back with the Colonel before the Colonel even signed Elvis.
Now, I remember, from what I know, because I've seen all your father's paperwork. Okay, so I had the pleasure and honor of going through years of paperwork.
It's voluminous,
and I remember reading that Tom Diskin had his sisters were singers, right? And is that how Tom met the Colonel?
So Tom met the Colonel through my father, because my father was friends with the Colonel through show business. At the time, the Colonel was booking Eddie Arnold, country singer. This is before Elvis. Elvis was doing local concerts and that kind of thing. Locally, he was big, but he was not a name yet. And my father knew at the time Tom Parker, before his colonelhood. Tommy's three sisters, Nancy, Mary, and Patty, booked themselves as the Three Little Dickens Sisters, a play on Diskin, the Three Little Dickens Sisters, and they were a good local singing group, and Tommy helped to manage them. I remember, I never saw it in the last several years, but there was a poster up in Milwaukee or one of the towns in Wisconsin, appearing tonight, the Three Little Dickens Sisters, in tiny little type at the bottom, also Elvis Presley. Can you imagine?
Wow.
The Three Little Dickens, I mean, early on.
Yeah.
And so my father got involved with the Colonel before Elvis was ever involved with the Colonel at all. In fact, in some ways, my father helped the Colonel sign Elvis. My father was involved with the Colonel helping to direct Elvis's career by signing him on. This is when he had just finished with Eddie Arnold, and the Colonel's looking for a talent to manage. Elvis could use, he had Bob Neal as his personal manager, but Bob Neal only had the ability to go something local. Right. And they were looking something bigger. The Colonel was interested in Elvis, and he saw the potential. He saw Elvis perform. He saw talent there, and he saw something that perhaps others didn't see. The Colonel needed to convince Elvis's parents. And Elvis and his parents were very close, mm-hmm. And they were very protective of Elvis. Elvis was a twin, mm-hmm. and his brother Jesse Guerin died at birth. He was stillborn. The mother, Gladys, was extraordinarily close, even protective of Elvis. The time where Elvis was being approached by the Colonel, Gladys Presley didn't necessarily trust the Colonel, thought he was a fast-talking Northerner. Well, there's nothing Northern about him. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, Vernon Presley, I think he saw dollar signs. This is my opinion. Mm-hmm. He saw something with the Colonel. He's ready to sign on the dotted line. Gladys Presley, not so much. She didn't trust the Colonel. The Colonel asked my father to write a letter to the Presleys, which he did. And my father had the letter. I've seen it. I don't know where it is all these years later. Mm-hmm. To the Presleys, saying, I can assure you that if you sign on with Colonel Parker, I will be able to help out and book Elvis in a number of different places and assist the Colonel this way. I don't know if that persuaded Gladys Presley. It undoubtedly helped with Vernon Presley. We know the end result. Mm-hmm. Was that part and parcel of what motivated them? I like to think so, but it's hard to know what went on, in the privacy of their kitchen in private talk. But my father did do what he could to encourage the Presleys to sign on with the Colonel.
When we first started talking, you told this great story about the amphitheater, the yes. Chicago amphitheater. And I always thought, and maybe a lot of the fans out there think too, that the Colonel just booked the amphitheater and that's where Elvis went. But actually he had different plans, right? Why don't you tell that story?
So Elvis is already bigger than anything. And the Colonel, part of what the Colonel did, Colonel always wanted to do something that was bigger, better than anything's been done before. So bigger contracts, more lucrative money for himself, of course, as the manager of Elvis. But Elvis would earn more money than anyone else for performances because that was Elvis. Elvis is not like anyone who ever came before. That's even including Frank Sinatra. Mm-hmm. Elvis was bigger, as you were alluding to before. Elvis was just huge and getting bigger by the day. Mm-hmm. They come to play Chicago as part of a number of cities on that particular tour. And at the time, the owner of the Chicago Stadium was the Wirtz family. Arthur M. Wirtz, who's the father of Bill Wirtz, grandfather of the now late Rocky Wirtz, owns the Blackhawks. Arthur M. Wirtz was known to like to hold on to his money. He was somebody who knew how to make a dollar, obviously, but he wasn't going to throw his money around. And when he heard what the Colonel wanted to charge to bring Elvis to Chicago and play his Chicago Stadium, oh, no, we don't pay that kind of money. It's not happening. Mm-hmm. And the Colonel said, well, this is Elvis Presley. He gets this money because he's bigger than anyone who's going to come before or come after. Mm-hmm. No, nothing happened. And the Arthur M. Wirtz dug in, said, if you don't play the stadium, you don't play Chicago. He underestimated the Colonel. The Colonel rented out the Chicago amphitheater and outfitted it with folding chairs. Who would have ever imagined? Right. If you take a look in 1957, any of the pictures, it's not the Chicago Stadium. It's the Chicago Amphitheater where he first wore that gold lame jacket. Elvis hated it. Elvis hated that jacket. But he wore it first in Chicago, 57, at the Chicago Amphitheater because the Colonel said, oh, no. You're dealing with the wrong guy. And then something because you know your Elvis details, Elvis did not play Chicago again from then until 72. That's unheard of all the major cities. Colonel kept Elvis out of Chicago and wanted the Wirtz family, I guess, and this is editorial comment, to feel a little pang of, we need. And he didn't play Chicago till 72. Yeah. That's right.
And he probably could have, too, especially when he went back on tour.
That's right.
Right after Vegas.
He could have. From 69 on.
Chicago's a big city. That could have been one of the first cities he went to.
Exactly.
But that's not how...
Colonel knew what he was doing. And I'm sure I wasn't there at the contract signing. in 72 when he brought him back, I'm sure the Colonel made up for lost time. You know.
Yeah,
Colonel was sharp as could be.
The concert in the amphitheater, I was, if memory serves me correct, I think, didn't your dad's band back Elvis up at the amphitheater?
My father, at different times from 1956 until Elvis's untimely death in 77, did everything with the show, with the exception, as my father would tell it, I didn't dye his hair and I didn't prepare his jewelry. Otherwise, he did security, lighting, decorating, the music, the merchandising. My father did everything with Elvis from the beginning to end. The Colonel found my father to be a versatile, skilled person who could do all those things. In the early days, he was leading the band. And if you see any of the early pictures, you'll see at different pictures, it has Al Dvorin, the name, on the bandstands.
Right.
In the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, there's a large picture of Elvis there, and you see clearly Al Dvorin on the bandstand. He had earlier had it as the King's Men. That's also my father's band.
Right.
Later had his name on there, but you'll either see Al Dvorin or the King's Men. He led the band. He was the band leader, and the Colonel got a kick out of this. Colonel was a little bit, eccentric about things. In Chicago, he wanted the band to be led instead of the baton that the typical maestro is using. He wanted my father to lead the band with a lit cigar. It's just, a crazy thing like that. I thought, okay, Colonel, whatever you say, It was the Colonel's way at kind of laughing at everything. Wanted my father to lead the band with a lit cigar. Yeah. Anyway, he led the band early on, and you'll see it in the pictures, either Al Dvorin or the King's Men. Yeah,
and interesting note, too, about the bandstands is when Howard did our show, our very first show, I think it was the 30th anniversary, I'm pretty sure, because we were at the Peabody Hotel in Memphis, and it was the biggest show we ever had. I mean, it was in the Tennessee Exhibit Hall. And this was a huge hall. I mean, they had car shows in this hall, to give you an idea. I mean, they would drive cars in there and have car shows. So it was filled. It was the biggest show. I'm very proud of it because it was the biggest and best we ever did. And Howard and Shirley did that show, because that was around the time that I got the phone call, are you Robert Alaniz? My dad, I found a card here my dad left. That's how I made the connection with your brother. So Howard had those bandstands with him. And he asked me, he says, well, what do you think? How much you think these are worth? And I'm like, I don't know. Those are historical.
That's the real thing.
Yeah.
That was the real thing. Those all the way to the earliest days of Elvis. That's right.
Yeah, and they were historical. I said, I don't know, Howard. I said, I just threw a number. I think I said $500, which was probably too small. But I'm more of an expert on Elvis memorabilia like this and the records and things like that. That stuff I know real well. So I was able to help Howard out with pricing some of that stuff. But when it came to those things, I just didn't know. But I'll tell you one thing, he sold every single one of them that very first show.
I have no doubt. That's the real thing. That's Elvis starting out. You're talking about early days of Elvis, before the Army, before the movies, before later on performances. That's got to be historic, and for collectors, that's got to be gold.
Let's talk about the Memphis charity show in '61, and let me tell you what I know about that show. I know from Al himself telling me, and then Howard and of course Shirley talking about it, and all the paperwork I saw. If I'm correct, Al was pretty much in charge of that show.
That is correct.
I mean, the big question is, would that show have even gone on without Al? I mean, if it did, how good would it have gone on without Al? What do you know about that?
He created and produced it. He was so proud of that. My father had a charitable side to him, as did Elvis and the Colonel. This is something that's not well known. There are many stories, and perhaps in another production we can talk about some of the things Elvis did. What Elvis did not want people to know of his offering money to help out with this building that was destroyed in a tornado, or this family. Elvis was incredibly charitable, as was the Colonel. Kui Lee, the Kui Lee Cancer Fund. Kui Lee was a Hawaiian entertainer, died young from one of the bad organ cancers. It was really, really bad. And they wanted to raise money for this cancer fund to fight and find a cure for cancer. My father was in charge of creating and producing the charity show, everything from start to finish. Now, one of the things he may have talked to you about was he was behind an 8 ball at one point when he thought he was going to be able to bring some of the bigger names from the 48 contiguous states, and he was striking out. I don't know if you've heard this story.
No, I have not. I know there were some people there. Wasn't Boots Randolph and some fairly popular names were there.
He started striking out, and then it occurred to him, we're performing here in Hawaii. He looked for the biggest names and some of the best entertainment from the actual Hawaiian Islands and produced it that way, saying the best in Polynesian entertainment. He thought he was behind an 8 ball when he's not finding the names he was looking for and people who could actually come over and fill out the different parts of the show to lead and to open the show. And then he had this brainstorm, and he called the best in Polynesian entertainment here, anywhere in the islands. And it was a huge success. He was very proud of that. Very proud of the charity concert. And of course, one of the things that we may talk about, and that which having to do with Pearl Harbor and the USS Arizona.
Yeah, I know he was very, very instrumental in it because, as I said, I've seen a lot of the paperwork and stuff, and many photos which I can show as we're talking. There's some great pictures of Al working with the colonel. Yes. You see the colonel sitting at a table. It's almost like a war room. They're plotting out every move, everything they're going to do. I remember there was a picture of him with, I think it's with Tom, and with the colonel, and who was the other one?
That's is a young man. He died young, unfortunately. That was Lee Gordon. He was the promoter. Okay. In the picture you're talking about, we had prominently displayed in our basement the 4 of them: Colonel, my father, Lee Gordon, the promoter, and Tommy Diskin. And that was from the performances in Hawaii.
At one point in time, Howard had put up the paperwork from the Hawaii show in an auction, and it was at my show. The auction house came up to me and says, "You knew Al, right? And you know Howard and everything. Why don't you go up and do a presentation about the Hawaii show?" So I did go up, and I was just telling everybody that this is historical. It's rock and roll history. Yes. It's an event that everybody will always remember, and they have. That was a big honor for him. And do you think he felt special that the colonel entrusted him with both of these projects?
The colonel and my father had a very special relationship. Even where officially my father's working for the colonel, he's working for Elvis Presley Enterprises. My father and the colonel were friends, good friends. They would very often talk when other people went out of the room, the promoters, the producers, people from RCA. When they would leave the room, my father and the colonel would talk as two friends would. Personal matters, things of the tour. There was a trust and a special bond. They were good friends besides business. During the 8 years that Elvis was making the movies, my father was still in continued contact with the colonel because they were friends. It wasn't a question of just using him for the tours and for his expertise. So there was a trust between the two of them, and you have to know something. Colonel knew how to make a buck. To entrust the merchandising to one person who otherwise can be stealing you blind if he chooses to. And my father was very proud of the fact that on every tour they ended, and they were always to the penny caught up with the way the money had been doled out and the merchandise sold. So there was a trust and there was a friendship between the two of them.
Now, speaking of merchandise, a lot of the stuff we have up here behind us on the wall here, a lot of this stuff is souvenirs and stuff that your dad was in charge of. The Pearl Harbor, I think it's a souvenir book. It says it's printed in Hawaii. This was his copy. There's invitation for Colonel Tom Parker's birthday party, which your dad attended. This is an original 1956. I think it's 1956 photo that they gave out at concerts. Because I've seen pictures from the 50s of concerts where a girl is holding that picture, and it came in 2 colors, and I think it was blue and in pink. And then other souvenir stuff and stuff in reference to what your dad was in charge of. But getting back to souvenirs, the one thing that fascinated me the most about all of the stuff that we found when we were going through the paperwork, boy oh boy, did your dad have a ton of those Blue Hawaii lays.
Yes.
I mean, there was documents. I mean, there had to have been at least 20 to 30 documents alone on the effort and the time that it took to make these lays exactly the right way. I mean, they make like a medallion out of paper with pictures on it promoting Blue Hawaii.
Yes.
And then they had the lays, which completely have fallen apart by
They disintegrated.
They disintegrated as time went by, right? Now, but it said it promoted the album and Blue Hawaii. So were they made for the Hawaii concert because they knew Blue Hawaii was coming out, or do you know anything about that?
As far as I can tell, the two things were in consonance with each other. The promotion for the movie was huge, and I think it was helped along by the concert. And you're not wrong. The lays, we knew about these in our house before they fell apart. I'm talking about 50 years ago.
Right.
We had them all over the place because they promoted that movie very heavily. It's probably one of the better movies Elvis made during that period of time. Mm-hmm. And because it was different, made in Hawaii, it had a special kind of interest to it. And you know your stuff. The song with which Elvis ended every concert, "Can't Help Falling in Love," came from Blue Hawaii, from that movie.
Yeah, it's funny because Carol and I just watched the Blu-ray came out not too long, 4K Blu-ray, and we watched it. And the movies they're different when you're younger. When you're older, you look back and you go, "How old is Angela Lansbury?"
Yeah.
You're looking at her going, she doesn't look like she could be Elvis's mother,
right.
And then you find out, I found out throughout the years, she was only, 3 or 4 years older than him?
That's right.
That was it.
That's great acting, isn't it?
Yeah, the lays and even pictures like this. This was kind of like the birth of some of the promotional stuff that was, that the fans bought. And obviously the Colonel knew this, and so he knew marketing was the key to everything. So at that point, when let's say when the Hawaii shows were over, okay, before your dad came back for the tours, what did your dad do during the movies? I mean, was he still an active part with the Colonel? Did he work with the Colonel on anything before 1970 when Elvis returned to Vegas?
No, during the movie years, Elvis is making those wonderful movies, and my father is then concentrating on his own agency in Chicago, the Al Dvorin Agency, downtown 54 West Randolph, and booking everything in sight. My father was busy booking, and because he was housed in Chicago, one might think that it was just more local. My father did something that was unheard of at the time, and that was actually being able to promote things all over the country, even where he is stationed here in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And so he was busy with that. He was in touch with the Colonel because of their friendship, but he was not doing anything with Elvis actively from 68, the comeback special, and then they hit the road 69, the international, and you know the rest of that.
Okay, so then let's go to 69, 70, when the Colonel, I take it Al did come on board at some point to work with the Souvenirs and all that kind of stuff in Las Vegas before Elvis went out on tour.
And the decorating. I mentioned before, among the things my father had done as one of his skills was decorating. He decked out the international. Of course, he had help. Mm-hmm. With anything you see, the bears, the little nipper RCA dogs, he had the teddy bears, he had the lays. Anything you see in the international time had my father's imprint on it as far as making his premiere at the international a happening.
And I noticed the hats. Remember the Summer Festival hats?
Yes.
I remember that Howard had a few of those, or maybe more than a few, but some of them said, Hilton, and then some said International Hotel. So that kind of, to me, indicated that Al had to have been there, because these photos here are from 1970. And I know that because in the movie That's the Way It Is, mm-hmm. you see these photos, which end up on a postcard. I think they're available on a postcard. They're also a menu. Now, this, of course, is not a menu. This is just, the blank back. Okay. But there were, the menus were like this. You get this when you went to dinner, and you look on the back and there's the menu. He didn't have many of those, but the whole point was the marketing train started. You could, at that point, right?
Colonel was a genius genius marketer. If we talk about the different skills, we could talk all day, all night, and list 100 different things Colonel was not good at, but superb. Marketing's at the top of the list. My father as well. My father grew up, and without going into a lot of detail, my father knew marketing. He understood about merchandising. He had grown up with that in his own life and understood it. And the Colonel saw that in him. That's why he was picked to be the one to lead the merchandising of the Elvis material. And as Sonny West told me, and something we'll probably talk about, in the beginning of the tour in 1974, when I was in Fort Worth, Texas, starting that tour, Sonny West told me, Jamie, you have to sell. You've got to sell. Elvis stuff sells. You'll make a lot of money. And between Elvis and the celebrity that he was, bigger than anyone else, everyone needed to bring home something at the end of a concert. You weren't going to come home empty-handed from an Elvis concert. Just wasn't going to happen. Just wasn't going to happen.
I know that for a fact.
And the Elvis souvenirs sold, and they sold well. A lot of people made a lot of money selling Elvis merchandise.
Yeah, I remember when I saw him all 3 times in Chicago, and I remember running to the souvenir stand. And to this day, I still do the same thing, right, Carol? We go to concerts. I got to go see what the souvenirs are, you know, and like I know we saw Clint Black and checked out the T-shirts and then posters and all that. Elvis was the same way. I mean, the first thing I did was went in, and, you know, I saw things. I really, like, remember this photo, and I remember that one there with where he's got the black cape on. I remember those, but those are from later concerts. In 72, I don't think this is 72. Maybe it is. I can't remember. But I bought everything. I bought especially like a button like this.
Sure.
I wore this button because this is like my favorite button. And I had one just like this, but this is a little larger than the other ones. It was funny because they came in 2 sizes. And this also came in it had an easel where you could actually sit it on your desk. I guess that was for girls who want to put it on their dressers or
that's
something.
Early on, because later on, that button, I know it very well. I sold these. I sold this picture, pictures, posters, buttons, albums, and scarves. Take home a little bit of Elvis. I sold that for $1. Those things went, and Sonny West actually gave me the best advice. He had said, he's tested me. So what item do you think you need to sell here? I figured, okay, let me be smart. Posters at the time went for $3. So I said posters, right? Because it's the most expensive item. Colonel always made sure everything was affordable. Nothing was real expensive. $3 most expensive. Wrong, he says, because if family's going to buy anything, maybe they'll buy one poster. But everyone in the family will want a button. He was right. So I would sell those buttons, the pictures, the posters, albums, the scarves. Those are $5.
And even Sonny is telling you this?
This is Sonny at the very beginning of the tour, 1974. He helped, for me as a 17-year-old, make a lot of money that summer when he said, A, you have to sell, and B, when he tested me as far as what he thinks the best-selling item, I mistakenly tell him posters. Nope, the buttons. Even though it's less, it's less expensive, you'll sell more of them. Sonny West helped me make a little more money that summer.
When officially did Elvis, or your dad, start touring with Elvis? I know the first tour, the first place he went, he was in Vegas, and of course then he went on tour. Now, of course, your dad was there obviously in 69 and 70. I believe it was 71 that he did the Houston Astrodome, and I think that was the first stop. Now, did Al start right then and there and go all the way with him from that point? Was he working with him for all the tours from that point on?
Right at the beginning, from the international and then all the touring. There was no tour from 69 on that was not including my father. Now, he wasn't doing the emceeing. He was not the master of ceremonies at the very beginning, but he was doing all the merchandising from the beginning. My father calls our house and Mr. Dvorin, Mr. Dvorin, we're hitting the road. Mr. Dvorin, and the Colonel was flamboyant. The Colonel was colorful. So he was there from the international and then all of the touring exclusively till Elvis's untimely death. But the actual emceeing came slightly afterwards. But he was doing the merchandising right from the beginning.
Okay, so he was there through the whole thing. Okay,
that's right.
So let's talk about the one I want to talk about the most is the Chicago Stadium. I I've already said a little bit about how anybody who watches my show knows how excited I was in '72 to see Elvis. He was at the Chicago Stadium, and we already talked a little bit about how it took a while for Elvis to get back there, but they finally brought him back. I think one thing I want to talk to you about, and we talked a little bit about this on the phone, was there's a little controversy, which is just absolutely driving me crazy because, I'm getting older, and the memory doesn't serve as well. But throughout all the years that I was doing Memphis and everything, and I've been an Elvis fan my whole life, I remember 1972 when I saw him. And when I saw Elvis, these are the things I remember. Number one, he came out on stage and he was not wearing a jumpsuit. And I was so pissed off about that. That's why I remember it so well, because I wanted to see him in a jumpsuit. But he comes out, he's wearing a jacket, and he comes out and he sings, the opening song. And I think after 2 or 3 songs, he takes the jacket off. And I'm thinking, well, it's okay. It's Elvis. Didn't get the jumpsuit, but it's Elvis. I remember taking my girlfriend at the time, and she was not a big Elvis fan. But by the end of the show, she was screaming and crying, and she was going gaga nuts.
Like the rest of them.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, I was in the mezzanine, which was just a little bit behind the stage, okay? Because they actually sold, I think, almost all the way around behind the stage. But unfortunately, I was off to, if you're looking at the stage, I was off to the left. Okay, which to me would be, to Elvis, would be Elvis's right. So he would come and turn and look up at everything, and it was cool. I'm glad I got the tickets there. So I do remember where I sat. I remember what he wore. And then the big thing I remember is the cherry bomb going off. There was a cherry bomb that went off while Elvis was singing. And I remember Elvis stopped and girls screamed. Yes. Everybody kind of screamed because they thought, oh my God, someone fired a gun. And then I remember Elvis saying, they shot me. Jokingly, he goes, oh, they shot me. And then everything kind of calmed down and he started up singing again. Now, I can't remember, in my memory, I could have sworn he started singing a song and the firecracker or the cherry bomb went off. He stopped and then he started the song again or picked it up where he left off. I can't remember. But so those are the things I remember. Now, the controversy comes in that there's so many different people saying different things. It's crazy. If you look at some of Graceland's books and documents, like they put out this great book of Elvis, all of Elvis's outfits that he wore, and then they would name where he wore them. The book is called Fashion for a King. And if you look in the book, that shows 72, the matinee show. It shows Elvis wearing the jacket and the pants and shirt. And it even says in the book that he only wore pants and shirt a couple times. But those are the only times he wore them. That made me think, okay, fine, because I thought I was at the matinee. So the big controversy was, what was he wearing in the afternoon versus the evening? Because I had a friend of mine who saw Elvis that night, and I remember him telling me, oh, he was great, and he wore the blue jumpsuit. And I said, oh, damn it, I would have seen him wearing the jumpsuit. That was my biggest disappointment. That's the number one thing. So it wasn't until recently, because I've told this story many, many years, especially in Memphis with fans from, overseas saying, oh, you saw Elvis in '72? What was it like? And I remember over and over saying, I went to the afternoon, the matinee show in '72, and he wore the pants and the shirt, and a cherry bomb went off, and blah, blah, blah. And this is what I remembered and told for years and years. And then just recently, there was some kind of, there were people saying that they saw him at night, and he wore the shirt and pants at night. And then another person said that he wore the blue jumpsuit in the afternoon, and I'm like, no, he did not. And then of course you and I had a conversation, and I think the key to it is the cherry bomb. So why don't you tell me, because you were there.
I was.
Okay. I had Joe Tunzi on the show not too long ago, and Joe was there too. All right. For some reason, Joe collaborated with me completely. He completely said, yes, the cherry bomb went off. It was the afternoon, blah, blah, blah. This is what he said. So I was very comfortable with that. I thought, oh, good. Joe Tunzi confirmed it. My memory is not failing. I'm not an old man after all, and I haven't lost it. And then I talked to you. So why don't you tell everybody what you remember of 72 Chicago it was Saturday, I believe.
Yes, it was. I would not bet my money on this. I wouldn't bet my life on it because, as you say, as we get older, I think some of the memories start to meld together.
Yeah.
But I was only at one concert, meaning not the afternoon and the evening. So here's what I recall. And I perked up when we spoke on the phone. And then once again, because, I remember that Saturday evening, I was at the evening performance where he was wearing jumpsuits. And the reason I even remember that is because it would have been much more exceptional. It would have been something that jumped out of my mind. Oh, he's not wearing the jumpsuit because he typically.
That's right.
That's
how I felt.
So he wore the jumpsuit. It was night, and the cherry bomb incident was terrifying. Elvis, I knew this from talk around the dinner table and things about Elvis and things we learned and things we knew about Elvis. Elvis had this fear of being shot on stage, of someone,
right.
The way he would say, there's some lowlife will be able to say, I killed Elvis Presley. And Elvis had an ongoing premonition.
And excuse me for interrupting, but you remember there was a movie that John Carpenter directed with Kurt Russell, who played Elvis. And in the storyline, in the plot line, Elvis was afraid of being assassinated.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And it's a real thing. Mm-hmm. When this I wouldn't have known it was cherry bomb. There was some kind of explosion. It sounded like a gun. I don't know anything about guns or ammunition. It sounded like a gun.
It sounded like a gun, yeah.
And the way you described it, it's exactly, because we were sitting on the main floor, I don't know how many rows back, let's say 20, 30, 40 rows back, and it was up to my left, which would be to your right from where you were sitting, and you heard it, and it was terrifying. Because all you think is a gun. Everyone, what I remember also then, because now I'm facing the stage, everyone on the stage hit the ground. They're all hit the floor. And of course, Elvis tried to cover up by, they hit, I'm shot, or they shot me. Try to kind of alleviate the situation.
Yeah, by adding humor to it.
But I have to tell you, it was scary. I think I have this right. I'll tell you why, because there was a whole tumultuous thing going on in that place. I'm sure the ushers and security probably rushed to the spot.
Oh, yeah. I remember seeing the Andy Frayne ushers running.
Go. Yes, sir.
Running in the background. Yeah. Like, you know how you could look up at the stadium, you could see like the area where you come in and sit.
Yes.
I saw them running down the path there.
Exactly. So we're all scared out of our head. At least I was. I speak for myself. Everyone on the stage hit the grounds. And then Elvis did start the song again. I couldn't tell you. I don't remember what song it was. But he did start from the beginning. And the reason I remember that, twice in that concert, and see, maybe we're at the same one, that time with the cherry bomb, there was another time he started a song. I don't remember which one. And he wasn't happy with it. I remember thinking to myself, that's so unusual. He stopped in the middle of the song, said, no, this is not going right, and started again. Does that ring true for you at that time?
I think I remember something about that.
Yeah.
I have a bootleg recording, an audience recording from that show where the cherry bomb goes off. A friend of mine was over, Steve Orlando, who people know, he's been on my show before. He's incredible knowledge of Elvis on tour. I played it for him. And of course, he had heard different stories because he was the one who made me start doubting about my age and my memory. Because he said, "Oh no, I read here, I read there that that was the night show, or Elvis wore the blue jumpsuit in the afternoon, and anyway, that's kind of where it all started." But we were listening to that CD, and at the end of the concert, your dad comes on and says, Elvis has left the building, thank you, and good night. Now, when Steve heard that, he said, that's it. It's the night show. Now, I said, oh, wait a minute. You mean to tell me that there's no possibility that Al has said it so many times that he could have possibly said good night instead of, good afternoon? And I told you that, what'd you say?
So there's several possibilities. Either because when you're in the stadium, you can't tell if it's day or night outside.
Right.
And when you go city after city, stadium after stadium, you lose track of what city you're in. My father used to have to remember, are we in Portland? Are we in Cincinnati? Are we in Miami? Where he was to be able to greet and speak to the crowd as the MC. And at the end, whether to say, typically, thank you and good night, or if you had a matinee, say thank you and good afternoon. Mm-hmm. It is possible he made a mistake. It wouldn't be like him. My father was very precise about these things. Mm-hmm. Make sure he's saying the right thing. That's one possibility. Or if the afternoon show had morphed into evening time, where it wouldn't be inappropriate to say and have a good night, for the rest of the evening. But typically at the end of a mezzanine show, a matinee show, my father, and I heard it myself on all those shows that I was at in 74, didn't miss a show. Typically in the afternoon, he would say, and thank you and good afternoon.
Right, and I think I mentioned to you too, Howard had given me a bunch of cassettes, because, your dad collected a lot of stuff after Elvis had passed away. So I was just doing research to see if there was anything interesting like prior to Elvis's death. And unfortunately, there really wasn't. But I did find a tape of your dad practicing. And and that's how I knew that he did say afternoon, because I heard him practice and say, Elvis has left the building, thank you, and good afternoon. There is a possibility, you're saying, that he could have just said good night and going into the evening. Because remember now, the show that I went and saw, it didn't start right away. It was a 2:30 show, but Elvis did not come on at 2:30. Elvis came on, I don't know, maybe a half hour later, because at
least.
Yeah, it took some time. So by the time we got out of there, it was going on 5:30, 6 o'clock.
The reason I would bet against it, although not with great certainty, is in summertime when you have long days, it doesn't get dark till 8:30 at night.
Right.
That at 5 o'clock, if it's breaking, then he would typically say good afternoon.
Yeah.
My one full tour of 1974. Every single night, there were no open days. There were no open days on that tour in 74. So every evening was filled, and I'd say half of them with matinees. So I know very well that at the end of the matinee, thank you and good afternoon. Okay. And of course at night would be, and thank you and good night.
But you are saying there is a possibility he could have just said it.
Could be.
He's only human, and they're doing
That's
like 1,000 concerts, it seems.
Sure.
So, it's easy to make a mistake.
Is it possible?
So,
sure.
So to wrap this whole debate thing up, it's still weird, because you're saying you heard the cherry bomb go off, but you're saying Elvis was in the blue suit.
Yeah. Yes.
I heard the cherry bomb, and he was not in the blue suit.
Which you would remember, yeah.
I remember what he wore.
Go figure.
Now I don't know.
Our minds play games.
Yeah. So if anybody watching the show wants to add something, I know a viewer recently said something about they remembered going to the show and the cherry bomb going off or whatever. Some lady had posted in the comments below. So if anybody else can remember anything from the Chicago show to verify what was Elvis wearing at the time that this, or any information in general, just let me know. Join us for part 2 of my interview with James Dvorin, where he's going to be talking about going on tour with his father and Elvis in 1974.